Hello and welcome to another video from me, this tutor. In this lesson we're going to be talking through all the knowledge you need to know about medieval Renaissance treatments. So this video is a talk through of all the information you need to know about Renaissance and medieval treatments. So have a listen to this a number of times, maybe 2 or 3 times, and then see what you can remember. Then have a look at my revision guide, my exam question practice videos, and develop all your skills ready for the exam. So we start our talk about medieval treatments with ancient ideas developing and influencing in the medieval era. So particularly Hippocrates and his use of the 4 humors to treat a patient. So he recommended that better diets and better living conditions would keep people healthy and stop illnesses. So you'd balance the 4 humors by perhaps in the summer when it's hot, making sure you have more water, and that would keep your humors in balance. So just sensible ideas about health, and he'd give lots of advice about healthy living conditions. Galen then further developed this idea by the theory of the opposite, by removing particular humours or adding extra humours to keep things in balance. This led to the sort of fashion of bleeding people. Now, the importance of this idea is particularly that it's a natural remedy rather than a supernatural remedy. So it starts to lead to some progress in the medieval era. So doctors in this time started to develop theories around these ancient ideas of the 4 humours. So a physician or a doctor might use a urine chart to decide which humours are to balance, and books started to include ideas around these ancient ideas. So things like Bold's Leech book and also another book called Compendium of Medicine were full of herbal ideas and ancient ideas that could maybe be used for the 4 humours. So religion was an important aspect of support of Galen and Hippocrates. You can talk about this as a factor. So Galen said in his book that the human body was perfect, and this agreed with the Bible's idea of God created people in the image of God. So therefore, the church supported the ideas of Galen and Hippocrates because their ideas were similar to the Bible. So that meant they were teaching them in their universities, in their libraries, in their sort of teaching classrooms, as it were, in the monasteries, that Galen and Hippocrates' ideas were correct. Christian Church, though, also did maintain superstitious ideas, which were maybe a bit of a negative. They advocated prayer and pilgrimage and confession as cures for diseases. They believed that God caused illnesses, as shown by the Bible with the plagues, and God sent cures, as shown again by Jesus curing people, etc. So it seemed to the church that God was behind diseases. There were other superstitious ideas, particularly wise women. These were women in local communities who might have lots of herbal remedies, but maybe some more strange superstitious remedies to try and cure illnesses. So this is free healthcare for the people, and it was using the idea of oral ideas passed down through time that were treatments that could help people. So recipes for something like a worm stew or something like that to cure people. Religion remained important again when we're thinking about treatment. So some of the first hospitals were created by the church. So an infirmary, a place for the infirm, you'd find in a monastery, were the early hospitals. However, obviously early medicine wasn't that great, so they wouldn't necessarily have a person with a contagious disease in their infirmary because it might spread the illness around the monastery and kill everyone. So they might have had something like a house for strangers just inside the gate of the monastery to see how ill somebody is, whether they could come into the infirmary or not. So influence of religion obviously takes us also to Islamic faith and the Arab world. So we need to be aware that it's not just Christians who are helping in terms of development of treatments. So Islam did much to improve medicine. So the Quran said that Allah provided all the cures on earth. So Arab doctors believed there were non-spiritual cures out there created by herbs and other things in the world. So they would go searching for these cures. Arab doctors also had much knowledge from Galen and Hippocrates. A lot of the ancient texts from the Greek and Roman Empire were in the libraries of North Africa and into near Asia. So the Turkish Empire had a lot of these works, and therefore their doctors were very well educated. The caliphs, the Arab leaders, supported the idea of developing knowledge. They would set up libraries called houses of wisdom to help develop knowledge in areas like medicine. So some important Arab doctors you might be aware of Razis and Ibn Sina. They used Galen's ideas and built on them. Ibn Nafis even suggested Galen was wrong about how blood flowed around the body, so they were willing to challenge his ideas as well. So Ibn Sina wrote many books, including the Canon of Medicine, which was reprinted over 60 times in many different countries, as that suggests. It's a key book for Renaissance doctors later on. He also suggested that techniques for testing the effectiveness of drugs that influence more modern ideas. So a bit more on religion. The Arab world also developed hospitals. In fact, hospitals like Baghdad were some of the first hospitals in the world in the 9th century. And you've got maybe evidence of even older hospitals going back to Cairo and Damascus. So people going on crusades would have seen hospitals and maybe taken back some of these ideas to Europe. So the Black Death obviously is an important aspect of medieval treatments, and it suggests that medieval treatments did not work very well. Remember that up to 50% of the population in Britain died due to the Black Death, suggesting that treatments were ineffective. So one of the ways that treatments of Black Death were ineffective was obviously religion had shown to be a failure. People had religious beliefs about prayer and confession, and still those seemed to fail to stop what they believed was God's punishment for their sins. So they started going to more extreme ideas like flagellation, where they whipped themselves in a sort of copying of Jesus being whipped before his crucifixion to show God that they're punishing themselves and they don't want to be given the Black Death. But again, this did not work. So more extreme ideas developed. So anti-Semitism was an extreme idea in this time. So the belief that perhaps the Jewish population were somehow were cursing them because obviously Christians blamed the Jewish population for the death of Jesus in the Bible stories, or maybe the Jewish population was somehow anti-Christian in their behavior. So they started to persecute the Jewish population to try and rid themselves of the Black Death. So other beliefs therefore developed around the Black Death. So miasma is one of the key beliefs that developed. It's a non-spiritual idea, the idea that bad smells and bad air were causing disease, and therefore sweet smells would prevent the disease, so carrying posies of flowers, for instance, and by cleaning up towns and cities. So Edward III had instructed London to be cleaned during the Black Death to try and stop the bad smells. Now, be aware of this miasma theory, that the plague doctor with the beaky nose is not in the Black Death. They are in the Great Plague of London, as I'll discuss later on. So then the Black Death also had the idea of person-to-person belief. And some ideas that were successful. So Guy de Chauliac was the Pope's doctor. He prevented the Pope from having a Black Death by isolating him in a room to stop person-to-person contact. Also by purifying the air, stop bad air. He had huge fires and herbs, etc. in the room, and he fed him a balanced diet for the four humours. So the Pope survived. Possibly the sort of quarantine, as it were, of him was probably quite effective. So more person-to-person contact ideas did develop. So they'd burn clothes of victims, they'd burn bodies of victims, they'd dispose of bodies as quickly as they could. They stopped doing the thorough funeral preparations for the dead and started to hurriedly remove the bodies. In Britain, it was an attempt to sort of quarantine towns and cities by shutting their gates in places like Bristol and Gloucester to stop the disease arriving. But often this was too late to stop the disease. We need to be aware of the importance of the aftermath of Black Death. So 40 to 50% of the population died. Many peasants gained more land. Obviously, because there was very few workers, they could demand more money and peasants became wealthier. So this led to a higher standard of living for peasants. They had more land, more wealth, and obviously they could have more food. Their living standards improved. And this led to an overall improvement in people's health. If we think about the significance of the medieval time for treatments, okay, remember we've got our 5 areas we can look at for significance. So long term, the ideas of Galen and Hippocrates dominated, with the 4 humours and bloodletting lasting well into Renaissance and possibly beyond. So therefore, significant that no superstitious ideas dominated. Negative significance, obviously religion did still uphold Galen and Hippocrates' ideas. Nobody could challenge them, as shown by Roger Bacon being imprisoned for challenging Galen's ideas, and superstitious ideas still remained strong. Important people and places, we could talk about Guy de Chauliac saving the Pope, for instance, showed that miasma was important, and obviously Edward III believed miasma was important as well. Size and scale, we could talk about a huge amount of deaths during the Black Death, suggesting that their treatments didn't work, they were ineffective. Today, obviously, doctors are still inspired by the Hippocratic Oath and the Hippocratic Method. Hippocratic method, the idea that you observe the patient, you then give the patient advice and a treatment. So you give that clear structure of your meeting with the patient. And then the Black Death, short term, so a high percentage of priests die and suggests that religion was not helpful. And finally, some factors of change worth considering for this time period. So religion is obviously a significant one, positively and negatively. It supports Galen Hippocrates' ideas as a non-supernatural idea. It allows Arab doctors to develop their ideas. We've also got, however, it encouraged superstition. Individual geniuses, of course, got Hippocrates with his Hippocratic method, Galen's and the four humours. We have some wealth. Rich people obviously could afford physicians. They could help progress medicine by funding physicians with new ideas. And then finally, communication. Books and idea sharing was limited. Trade was pretty bad. Communication routes were pretty bad. But obviously, we do have some books are being developed, like Leech books, and the Arab world is sharing their books, with a minor factor there of war, perhaps, with the Crusades being helpful to share books. Sorry, please allow me to interrupt just for a moment to tell you about some of the other services I offer. So look at my website, historytutor.co.uk, to find out more about history tutoring if you want help directly one-to-one, or if you've got a small group of friends who want help, then look me up. Also, if you want more information about my revision guides, they're available on Amazon. They are packed full of revision notes, all the essential facts, organised into revision cards or simple forms you can just look over again and again to revise. Packed full of videos helping you answer questions. I tutor you through how to answer all the different types of questions. Lots of videos explaining how to do this. Some of them are free on YouTube. Look me up for more videos, but you'll find more and more videos on my revision guides. So take a look. So now on to the Renaissance. Now, it's worth remembering that question 3 in the exam is about similarities. So I'm going to point to similarities and differences between medieval and Renaissance ideas. So the four humanists did remain strong in this time period. We could talk about someone like Charles Scarborough or Richard Wiseman, who were famous doctors. Richard Wiseman, for instance, tried to cure King Charles by using the four humors. And obviously, we've got a picture of Charles Scarborough here in the image, and it's got a reference to classical ideas in the background with statues and columns, suggesting he is a bit of an advocate of the classic ideas of Galen and Hippocrates. As suggested earlier, the miasma idea remained strong in the Great Plague, and this is the plague doctor with the sort of beaky nose I mentioned earlier. So they would have the sweet flowers in the end of their nose. They would make sure that there are sweet flowers around places, better smells. They'd be cleaning up places to ensure that miasma and bad air were not causing disease. And obviously part of their treatments were about sweet smells. Superstition also remained the same. Here's an idea of a superstitious sort of necklace somebody might wear, an abracadabra charm to ward off bad spirits during the Great Plague. So clearly, superstition, like the wise woman in the medieval time, superstition remained strong. Religion also is an important idea still in the Renaissance time. So kings and queens believed they had the power from God to make them kings, of course, or queens, and therefore they believed the power of God flowed through them. So they thought they could cure illnesses. So the king's touch was the famous idea that they could touch people and it would cure them from a disease called the king's evil, which was a skin disease called scrofula, which made their skin look really bad. Culpepper's Complete Herbal also suggests that ideas remain the same. So it's suggesting that herbal remedies were important in treating people, and also it does help. A couple of minor changes develop. So Culpeper does suggest bloodletting is not so important, and it also does enable quacks to start developing their own herbal remedies that leads to this idea of medicine for the masses a little bit more. More on that later. New ideas developed. So Paracelsus was a scientist. He was an alchemist and he was interested in chemicals. So he suggested that chemicals could be used to treat illnesses. He suggested mercury and arsenic might be used as medicines in small doses to cure things like syphilis. Obviously, in small doses because they are poisonous. Exploration and empire suggested new ideas also. So quinine became popular as a drug that could be used to deal with fever, particularly if you had something like malaria. Other new ideas developed as medicine became more available to the masses. So doctors and country doctors became cheaper. Apothecaries, like a chemist, became available, or you could have a visit from a quack. So a quack was a travelling medicine salesperson who would claim to be selling miracle cures in bottles. and maybe sell things like cure for alls. So a famous one in the 1700s is Daffy's elixir. This idea that they could have this ointment to help you with any illnesses. Bit of a con trick, but definitely an idea of medicine for all. Another new big idea was towards the end of our time period. So Renaissance goes right up to the year 1800 in the AQA exam. So we need to be aware of smallpox. So Jenner obviously discovers that cowpox can prevent smallpox and comes up with the first vaccination. Before a vaccination, we had inoculation. But inoculation obviously was a bit of a risky business because you were cutting open somebody with a potentially dirty knife and infecting them, and then rubbing an unknown amount of pus from a smallpox pox into that cut to try and give them immunity from smallpox. So obviously it could be risky. People could die potentially if there was too much smallpox or if the wound became infected. So Jenner, though, initially was a smallpox inoculation doctor, and he set up his clinic in the countryside in Gloucestershire, hoping to inoculate people. Then he found that the people suggested that they didn't need smallpox inoculation because they had cowpox that would clearly prevent them from having smallpox. So the famous experiment, 1796, a small boy, James Phipps, was given cowpox from a local milkmaid's cowpox pus, and he obviously then had cowpox, and then a few days later Jenner gave the boy smallpox and he survived. So there we are. He did try this on 16 more children to check it worked and found it was a great success. So what's the significance of Renaissance treatments? So in the long term, miasma became an important theory. The success of the Great Plague using miasma ideas helped to made this remain a strong theory right until the 1800s. Think about sewer development in the 1800s was still based around miasma. Important people and places. Napoleon, the American presidents, all supported Jenner's smallpox vaccine. Size and scale. The Great Plague, based on miasma, greatly reduced the death rate. So 40–50% of people died during the Black Death, but we're talking tens of thousands during the Great Plague. Today, we have smallpox eradicated, and we believe vaccines are a very important treatment, and that boils down to Jenner. And short-term, Jenner's work on smallpox inspires later doctors in the 1800s like Pasteur and Koch developing their treatments and their vaccines, particularly Pasteur, who develops the second and third vaccines. So there are some important factors. Individual genius, clearly, we didn't mention it, but Harvey obviously improves the circulatory system. So this obviously suggests the idea of bloodletting is ridiculous because blood just goes round and round the body. It's not made in the liver. You don't need to bleed people. Edward Jenner developed the first vaccine, so two geniuses of treatments. Government led to the quarantine ideas of the Great Plague, more of which you can find out about in my public health videos, and this promoted the idea of miasma. Communication. Books were more available, the printing press had been developed, so Culpeper's Complete Herbal could be printed to many people and shared, helping to create cheaper doctors, but also cure for all with quacks, etc. Improved transport led to ideas like inoculation being shared. We think about it being in sort of the Near East, and with Lady Montague bringing it back to Europe through better trade links. Religion, people still believed in God. The King's touch, so obviously it's a bit of a negative. Luck. Jenner was very lucky in two ways. So firstly, he moved to an area where people believed cowpox prevented smallpox. Lucky him. Secondly, his experiment was lucky that he didn't kill one of the children. We can now think about some similarities between medieval treatments and Renaissance treatments. So religion clearly is still an important factor in both times. They have religious cures, whether that be religious superstitious cures around the Black Death in the medieval time or religious superstition around King's touch in Renaissance time. We've also got individual genius in both times with Hippocrates and Galen in medieval time and Jenner and smallpox in Renaissance time. Great communication. We've got some books in medieval time. We've got communication by travelling off to the wars in the Crusades. We've got great communication with Culpeper's book, but also something like Lady Montague bringing back inoculation ideas. Okay, so some differences to some extent. War perhaps has a little bit more importance to treatments in particular in medieval time, and luck and chance is a little bit of a Renaissance idea around Jenner that sort of stays in the Renaissance time. Cool. I hope you found that useful with all the key information. Maybe watch me again. See if you can memorise more details. And don't forget, I have revision guides packed full of revision cards and exam questions and videos explaining how to get top marks in your answers. Okay. Bye bye for now.